Joining us right now is Clifford May, president of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and it's so good to have you because Clifford May, because we've been talking about the stunning comments from Benjamin Netanyahu. He is such a stirring leader, in my opinion, the Prime Minister of Israel, where he is really pushing back hard against this unwarranted criticism and possibly facing a UN inquiry over the death of civilians in Hamas. What should America be doing to defend our ally against these allegations?
Well, the first thing is to know the truth, which you've alluded to, and I want to elaborate on. There is no nation in history that has ever done more to spare civilians during a conflict than Israel has during this latest operation. Absolutely none. What they've done is absolutely unprecedented. Meanwhile, Hamas seeks to kill civilians, does everything it can to achieve that, and uses its own civilians, there's no doubt about this anymore, as human shields, all of which is a violation of the most basic laws of war. Now, the idea that the UN and others condemn Israel and condone Hamas is absolutely ludicrous. It's absolutely bizarro. It makes no sense whatsoever.
So you hit the nail on the head, and Larry and I have been talking about this all morning. It is bizarro. So why do you think it's occurring? Why this anti-Semitism toward Israel defending itself against terrorists?
Well, listen, the discussion of anti-Semitism, which is one of the world's oldest and most durable prejudices, would take us throughout most of the morning and perhaps the rest of the week. I think it is important to understand that radical anti-Semitism in the 20th century took the form of pursuing through genocide, a Europe without Jews. Radical anti-Semitism in the 21st century takes the form of pursuing a Middle East without a Jewish state. And that's what's going on, and that's what too many people seem to be supporting. And in terms of what we can do, by the way, the UN Human Rights Council should not be getting a penny of taxpayer money. We shouldn't be on it. It's a collection of chronic human rights violators who are operating in an Orwellian fashion. It's time to be very clear that that organization, and there are others at the UN, do not deserve American support, least of all from taxpayers.
Clifford May joins us, and I'd like to talk about your latest column at the Washington Times, because you make a very important point that everyone must hear, because the media plays a big part in this, and these journalists who are reporting from Hamas-controlled Gaza, they are not really revealing to their viewers or their readers the kind of pressure they're under from that government.
Well, that's right. And if you just think about it, and it's probably occurred to you guys, if you've been watching TV, I don't care what channel, if you've been reading, you've seen Israelis in their uniforms, you've seen their tanks, you've seen their helicopters, you've seen the rubble, and you've seen the crying widows and the children picking through the rubble. What you haven't seen are Hamas combatants shooting missiles, firing guns, running through the streets. Not at all. And there's a lot of, and if you hear casualty figures, nobody questions that. Basically what's happening is journalists in Gaza are operating under very difficult circumstances. They are being coerced, they are being manipulated, they are being restricted, they are being threatened, all of that. Now, I understand that. I also want to say that any journalist working in Gaza is brave. I'm not asking them to be braver. I'm not asking them to be reckless. I am asking that they be honest about the conditions in which they are working. The New York Times had a piece the other day about the difficulties of working in Israel. There's some military censorship. You can't say the Golani Brigade is going here or that kind of thing. It's very light.
That's strategic stuff.
What's that?
That's strategic. Right? That's troop deployment. Of course, you shouldn't be able to say that.
Well, journalists wouldn't say that.
But my point is this, and I sent a note to the journalist to which I haven't gotten a reply. Fine, write that story, but also write the story about what goes on in Gaza and the restrictions under which journalists are operating. Now, one reporter, a Palestinian French reporter, actually he got detained. He got heavily interrogated. By the way, in a command and control center in a hospital, he got mistreated. And when he left, he did write a story about it for the left-wing French magazine Libération. And then the story was, quote-unquote, unpublished at the request of the writer. What does that mean? It means he was afraid, he was threatened and was afraid to have it up.
Yep.
Journalists remember that in 2006, Fox journalists Steve Centani and Olaf Wig were captured by a group, abducted, held, forced at gunpoint to convert. At any day, every journalist knows you can be taken, handcuffed, a hood put over your head, your dispatch is read, and if those reading them don't like it, that may be it for you. I understand how difficult these conditions are, but at least tell your editors, tell your producers, tell your readers and your reviewers what this means, and it means you can't report freely and without favor when you're working in Gaza. You do the best you can.
Right, Cliff. You hit it's the objectivity that's that's lacking in all the reporting. And what's troubling to me is this pro-Hamas. You write about it in your latest column. This pro-Hamas reporting, this sympathizing with Hamas. Even in the images, we see the Israeli tanks, as you point out. We never see Hamas terrorizing and using their people as human shields, as you also point out. So the American people are getting an anti-Israeli position here.
Right.
Am I right?
They're getting propaganda.
I mean, is this not, and the Obama administration is bolstering this with their UN ambassador now who's pivoted, Samantha Power, and the president.
To be fair, the U.S. was the only country that voted against the UN Human Rights Council resolution on the conflict, which was as egregiously bad as any could. If you ask me what that resolution said about the use of human shields, the answer is nothing. If you ask me what it says about lobbing missiles at the airport in Israel trying to bring down a passenger plane like was done over the Ukraine, the answer is not a word.
Right.
In fact, Hamas was never mentioned whatsoever. Not one European nation could do better than to abstain. They were all that cowardly about it. At least Samantha Power, at least this administration voted against that, and I give them credit. And I see some changes right now that I want to actually applaud.
Clifford May, actually, can you hold that thought? Because we have some interesting programming today because of our Feed the Children Radiothon. We actually can keep you and have a little more time with you, but I do want to check in with traffic because we love to do that every 10 minutes on the 5. So Clifford May is going to stay with us. He has something to say. I have something to ask him. Crystal Wright has something to say. So much to talk about with Israel, so stay there. We continue with Clifford May, president of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. And you wanted to make a couple of points about the Secretary of State. Please do so, sir.
Yeah, well, what you're hearing now that I find a little bit heartening, because I think he's had some pretty bad missteps, is he is saying that Hamas now needs to be disarmed.
Right.
And that disarmament of Hamas, and I think this is what he is suggesting, and I hope I am understanding correctly, that needs to precede the rebuilding of Gaza. Last thing we want to do is bring in all the concrete and steel that has been used not over the last 5 years to build hospitals and schools, and factories and office buildings, but tunnels under Gaza and deep into Israel, which were meant to allow terrorists to come out on Israeli territory, kill, slaughter. There were people who were going to come with tranquilizers and handcuffs, grab Jews, drag them into the ground, and hold them as hostages by the dozens or even by the hundreds. The price of I think we should want to see Gaza revived and rehabilitated. The last few years that hasn't happened, but it has to start with disarmament.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Cliff. But frankly, it's a month into this or more, and the Secretary of State, Kerry, and the President should have said this from the get-go. It wasn't. I mean, we need to go back to the fundamental. The fundamentals of who started this. Don't you agree that it was Hamas who started this war? Hamas who captured the 3 Israeli teens and killed them.
What?
You talk about the tunnels. That's what Netanyahu has said even yesterday. That, look, if you guys were attacked, any country, any sane country that was being attacked the way we're being attacked by terrorists, you would react the same way. I just feel like there's still not a lot of huge support. And as you pointed out, that UN resolution or whatever it is was a joke. The UN is a joke.
And by the way, U.S. taxpayers will be paying millions of dollars for a quote-unquote investigation based on that.
What do we need to investigate?
Waste of money.
But Cliff, what do you think?
There's nothing that the UN can investigate. You're absolutely right about what you're saying, and I want to make one other point. You'll hear people say that this conflict was in response to occupation. They mean one of two things. Hamas's view is that every inch of Israel is occupied territory.
Yes.
Right.
Israel must be exterminated,
right, eradicated. Yeah.
Eradicated. That's in its charter. This is not my interpretation.
Correct.
No,
but the other thing that people don't get is they talk about occupied Gaza. Gaza had every Israeli soldier, settler, farmer was withdrawn from Gaza in 2005.
Right.
In 2006. There was an election. It wasn't a very good election, but it was an election. Hamas essentially won. The following year, they threw out their Fatah rivals. They killed some of them, kneecapped others, threw others off of roofs. And then they began to attack Israel and threaten Israel, at which point Israel did not reoccupy, but they did set up a military blockade. Food, humanitarian supplies continued to come in, even during this conflict, but they tried to keep the weapons out. We now know they didn't do so successfully. Now Hamas is saying you need to lift the blockade so we can develop. Well, Gaza can only develop if they're not bringing in weapons, if they're bringing in things to help the people of Gaza. We have to see the disarmament first, development second.
Clifford May is our guest, president of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, and all of this leads me to my big question for you. And I got to set it up though, because see, the way I look at this. For decades now, the United States has taken this position that we want to be the peace broker. We want to be able to finally settle this conflict, and we want to be an honest broker for peace to get Israel and the Palestinians to the table. And the only reason that American presidents try to do this, in my opinion, is they want a Nobel Peace Prize. There's no other reason. It's their own ego. Wouldn't it be better for the United States of America to forget about this idea of being an honest broker for peace and being the one that brings them all to the table? We don't need the Jimmy Carter moment at Camp David. No, we don't. Here's what we should do. We should proclaim that peace is not our first tactic here. Defending and standing by our ally Israel is our number one agenda item. Let Belgium be the broker for peace.
You're never going to get peace over there. We're never going to be able to broker
peace. So why
peace.
pretend? Why pretend that we're an honest broker for peace? Let's just stand by Israel and leave it at that.
Yes, and I think it's important to recognize what Israel really is. Israel Israel is on the front lines in a global conflict against Islamism and jihadism. There is no way Israel can make peace with Islamists and jihadists any more than we can. In fact, Israel is going to be the last to be at peace because of where they are physically. Hamas has an ideology. They are not just violent extremists. They have a serious ideology. It is different, not substantially, from that of Hezbollah, from that of Iran, from that of the Taliban, from that of the Islamic State. There are differences among these groups, but they are all supremacists. They are all bellicose. They all believe that a jihad must be fought against infidels, and there is only one nation in the Middle East that is governed by infidels, that is Israel. As long as that's the case, Israel cannot make peace. What you can have a ceasefire, you can have a long-term truce, and actually that's what we should focus on. It doesn't win you Nobel Peace Prizes, but it could keep the death toll down and make it easier for Israel and for Palestinians to improve their lives if Palestinians want to improve their lives.
And at the end of the day, the fact is Israel is virtually surrounded by its enemies over there in the Middle East. That's a fact. You've outlined it. And Iran, like you said, Hamas is part of the bigger radical Muslim mentality of Israel does not have a right to this. It needs to be obliterated. I mean, we know.
How do you make peace with that? Yeah,
you can't. I think we need to pull out of this. Each president tries to tackle this. They have shuttle diplomacy. I'm so tired of hearing about shuttle diplomacy.
Clifford May, president of the Foundation for Defense of Democracy. Thanks for staying with us a little longer. Appreciate it. Such an important topic, and great to hear from you.